Usually, when you step into a grand museum, say like the National Portrait Gallery or the Louvre,
Right.
and you stand in front of this massive, ornate oil painting of a royal palace, there's this very clear, almost tyrannical expectation of where your eyes are supposed to go.
Yeah, the composition is completely engineered.
Exactly. It forces your gaze right to the center of the canvas. You're meant to look at the crown, the jewels catching the light, the heavy velvet robes, just the sheer crushing weight of empire radiating from the figures in the middle.
Because the architecture itself, right, the towering pillars, the sweeping staircases, it all literally points toward the monarch.
Right. You, as the viewer, are placed in a very specific relationship to that image.
Visually speaking, it's a relationship of subjugation.
Yeah.
I mean, the art is designed to overwhelm you with scale and spectacle.
Yeah, it is.
The message is inherently binary and totally uncompromising. They're the monarchs, immortalized in oil and gold, and we are the subjects, standing on the museum floor just looking up.
There's no room for human frailty in that central focal point. It's meant to be clean, public, and utterly untouchable.
Absolutely untouchable.
But I want you, the listener, to imagine walking up to that massive, intimidating painting. And as you stare at it, you suddenly realize that the artist actually didn't care about the crown at all.
Wait, really?
Yeah, like the jewels are painted with a lazy brush, the throne is out of focus. What the artist really spent his time on, what he desperately wanted you to look at, is this tiny, almost hidden detail way down in the bottom left corner, practically in the shadows.
Oh, the royal couple.
Exactly. The royal couple, no longer posing, quietly arguing over who has to turn out the lantern before bed.
That's such a great image.
Suddenly, the whole grand spectacle just fades into irrelevance, the empire vanishes, and you were just looking at two people trying to figure out how to live with each other.
Which brings us to today.
Yes, welcome to the Common Room at Chesterton Radio. We are broadcasting to you today from our little station right here on Commercial Street in Atchison, Kansas. The coffee is still hot on the table.
Always is.
And we just finished listening to an absolutely incredible piece of archival audio together, and we want you to pull up a chair and join us for a deep dive into it.
Yeah, we are looking at a piece of tape that completely subverts that grand royal portrait we just described.
Completely tears it down.
It is My Dearest Angel, a play written by R.F. Delderfield, and it was originally broadcast on the BBC on December 21st, 1963. This was part of their really renowned Sunday play series.
And the thing is, if you look solely at the title and the cast list, you might make some very swift, very limiting assumptions.
Oh, for sure. You see 1960s British historical costume drama.
Right, and you see Queen Victoria and Prince Albert.
And your brain immediately prepares for a dry, dusty history lesson about the 19th century.
You expect stiff upper lips, political speeches, lots of pomp and circumstance, but the true mission of our deep dive today is to just strip away that assumption entirely.
We are asking a completely different question of this text.
Right, we're asking, is this really a play about monarchy, politics, and the British Empire? Or is it fundamentally a play about the gritty, beautiful, and deeply complex reality of marriage?
Because that tension, that exact tension between the public monolith and the private reality, that is the engine of the entire drama.
Yeah, Delderfield is using the most public couple in the history of the world to dissect the most private institution, which is matrimony.
But to truly understand how he peels back that royal velvet, we really have to look at the vessel he chose to deliver this story.
We have to immerse ourselves in the lost world of 1960s British radio.
Because the very specific nature of how this story was broadcast to the public back in 1963, it fundamentally shaped its profound, almost uncomfortable intimacy.
So let's talk about that format. This was broadcast as an 81-minute, continuous, unbroken historical drama.
Think about what that requires from a listener.
It's massive.
It requires a level of cognitive surrender that is almost alien to our modern media consumption.
Totally alien.
I mean, this broadcast happened at the tail end of an era shaped by a man named Val Gielgud. He was the brother of the famous actor John Gielgud.
Right, the Shakespearean actor.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And Val served as the BBC's head of drama for an astonishing 29 years, from 1934 all the way to 1963.
That is a staggering tenure.
It really is.
Yeah.
And Gielgud's philosophy of broadcasting is crucial here. He did not view radio as background noise. He approached the BBC as a national theater of the air.
He took it incredibly seriously.
He was a profound conservative in his programming, and he harbored an utter contempt for the idea of popular soap operas or, serialized melodramas that were starting to gain traction in other parts of Europe.
He believed in straight, serious drama.
Yeah, during the Second World War, he actively argued that broadcasting classical drama wasn't just entertainment. It was a bulwark for the preservation of civilized values.
Which is wild. Placing the burden of preserving civilization on a radio play is an incredibly heavy load, but it tells us exactly how the BBC viewed its audience.
The sheer expectation of attention is just staggering.
Right. They were operating under the fundamental assumption that ordinary listeners, not literary critics, not academics with tweed jackets.
Such regular working people.
Exactly. Regular people could and would simply sit down for an hour and 20 minutes and listen.
There was no pause button.
No pause, no rewind if you missed a crucial line of dialogue. The audience was expected to follow complex character development, historical nuances, and deep philosophical arguments in real time.
Without being rushed or spoon-fed.
That assumption of intellectual stamina is something we have largely lost today.
Oh, completely. Today, media is often designed with the expectation of distraction.
Second screens, short attention span.
The constant ability to just pause and walk away. But a continuous 81-minute audio broadcast demands that you build a world in your head and sustain it entirely through focused listening.
Wait, hold on. I think we need to be careful here because we might be romanticizing 1963 a bit too much.
What do you mean?
Like painting it as this utopia of deep intellectual listening. The reality of broadcasting technology back then was pretty restrictive and not always in a good way.
Oh, sure. The hardware was completely different.
Yeah, you were often listening on these bulky, heavy valve radios that literally took time to warm up. The transmission quality could be incredibly poor, subject to atmospheric interference.
You'd get static channels drifting.
Exactly, and you were completely at the mercy of the rigid BBC schedule. If you were doing the dishes and missed the first 5 minutes, you were completely lost.
That's true.
So the attention we're praising might have been driven just as much by the physical limitations of the technology as by some superior cultural stamina.
Okay, I agree the physical limitations were absolute. The technology was cumbersome, and it tethered you to a specific room at a specific time.
Right.
But the byproduct of those limitations was a cultural habit of communal, focused listening. Because the radio was a piece of furniture in the living room, you couldn't take it with you on a jog or listen while scrolling on a phone.
It was the primary activity.
Exactly. And more importantly, for My Dearest Angel, the form of radio itself perfectly serves the subject matter.
How so?
Well, the scholar Neil Verma has analyzed this era extensively, pointing out that radio operates as a theater of the mind.
I love that phrase.
It's so accurate. The producer Donald McWhinney noted that the spoken word, when placed in close focus, has this unique power to communicate what he called secret states of mind.
That is the magic of the medium right there. I mean, there are no pictures. If this were a television play, our eyes would be constantly drawn to the glittering chandeliers of Windsor Castle.
The intricate lace on Victoria's dresses.
Right. The medals on Albert's chest. The visual spectacle of the monarchy would overwhelm the human element.
But because it's radio, the absence of those pictures forces us closer to the characters.
We cannot see the crown. We only hear the silence, the sharp intakes of breath, the hesitations in the dialogue.
The sound of footsteps pacing a floorboard.
Exactly. When you strip away the visual grandeur of the monarchy, you are left eavesdropping behind closed doors.
The public spectacle is essentially annihilated by the intimacy of the microphone. It becomes almost uncomfortably private.
Yeah.
And that unbroken, intense attention that the 1963 radio format demanded is exactly what is required to appreciate the central conflict Delderfield is setting up for us.
Because he is not giving us a historical pageant.
No, he is giving us two young people trapped inside a massive, unfeeling institution trying to figure out how to belong to each other.
The brilliance of Delderfield's script is how quickly he establishes that tension. The tension between Victoria the Queen versus Victoria the wife.
And Albert the Prince Consort versus Albert the husband.
Yes, we see this the very moment Albert arrives at Windsor Castle. Let's look at that arrival scene.
It's so good.
If you were directing a Hollywood biopic, you would give Albert a massive, triumphant entrance. You'd have the Lord Chamberlain bowing, rows of guards in scarlet uniform.
Sweeping orchestral music, the whole 9 yards.
Right. But Delderfield entirely bypasses the grand ceremonial reception. He just subverts the historical expectation immediately.
He has Albert take a wrong turn in the castle.
Yes, instead of meeting the Prime Minister in the welcoming committee, Albert wanders away from the protocol and ends up in this dusty, unused suite of rooms.
Where a couple of servants are just making an inventory.
It's such a quiet, strange introduction for a prince.
But what he does in that room establishes his entire character psychology. He doesn't demand to be taken to the queen.
He doesn't act outraged that he's lost or ignored.
Right. He walks over to an old, broken organ and tries to coax a folk tune from his homeland of Bavaria out of it.
He just wants to see how it works.
And then he starts inspecting the ornaments with one of the servants, a girl named Schilling. He picks up a little porcelain shepherdess.
The servant reads from the inventory that it is fine mice and china.
But Albert corrects her. He points out that it is actually the work of an inferior Dresden factory.
Which tells us everything we need to know about what he values.
Exactly.
He isn't seeking the regal or the grand. He is a man who wants to tinker with a broken instrument to see how it works.
And who actually possesses the knowledge to correctly identify a cheap piece of porcelain.
He is seeking the tangible, the ordinary, the real. He is grounded in facts and mechanics, completely ignoring the massive political machine waiting for him down the hall.
Delderfield sets him up as a man of substance, thrust into an environment utterly obsessed with surface-level protocol.
And this grounded reality of Albert just crashes directly into Victoria's reality.
Because Victoria is struggling to balance her massive, absolute royal authority with her own physical and emotional vulnerabilities.
The proposal scene is a total masterclass in this dynamic.
The psychological subtext there is phenomenal.
Traditionally, of course, the man proposes to the woman, but she is the sovereign.
Protocol dictates that no one can propose to the queen. She must be the one to ask him.
Right. She sends for him, and they are alone in the room. She asks the question, and he joyfully accepts.
But then Delderfield gives us this deeply human, almost comical physical detail.
Because Albert is very tall, and Victoria is famously quite short.
In the immediate aftermath of the proposal, she realizes the glaring physical disparity between them.
And what does? She grabs a hassock footstool and literally stands on it.
"Now I am as tall as you," she says.
It is a desperate physical attempt to bridge the gap. She is trying to reconcile her towering, unassailable royal authority with her small, vulnerable physical reality as a young woman in love.
She wants to be his equal in affection, even though she is his absolute superior in law and state.
It's a visual metaphor translated perfectly into audio through the scraping of the stool and the shift in her voice's projection.
That desire for equality in love, while maintaining absolute supremacy and power, is the contradiction that almost destroys their marriage.
Victoria actually believes she can separate the two.
Yeah, she believes she can be the queen in public and a wife in private without the two roles ever contaminating each other.
Which brings us to the agonizing turning point of the play, the chess game scene.
Oh, this scene.
Picture yourself standing in this drawing room. It is late evening. Victoria and Albert are married now. They are sitting in a room suffocated by ladies-in-waiting.
And they are playing a parlor game.
A sort of historical guessing game about castles and abbeys.
It is mind-numbingly, aggressively boring.
Right. Victoria is reciting trivial facts about an abbey on the River Tweed associated with Sir Walter Scott. It's the kind of sterile, polite evening designed entirely to pass the time without anyone saying anything of substance.
But Albert, who is a brilliant, restless, highly educated man, he just cannot endure the sterility of it.
So he falls asleep.
And he doesn't just nod off quietly. He snores.
Audibly, right in front of the entire court.
Victoria's reaction is explosive. Her pride as a young wife is hurt, but her dignity as a queen is completely outraged.
To wake him up, she refuses to just tap him on the shoulder. She storms over to the fireplace, grabs the heavy metal fire irons,
and drops them onto the hearth with a massive, startling crash.
The sound design here is crucial. That sudden, violent crash of metal on stone shatters the suffocating politeness of the room. It is a total shock to the listener's system.
She immediately dismisses everyone, clearing the room so they are finally alone. And the nature of the fight that follows reveals the core rot in their dynamic.
She demands an apology for his boorish conduct.
She accuses him of humiliating her in front of her subjects. Her language is that of a monarch disciplining an unruly, disobedient subordinate.
She is pulling rank.
Totally. But Albert absolutely refuses to play the role of the subordinate. He flips the script on her entirely.
He doesn't apologize.
Instead, he says, "I'm giving the queen good advice, ma'am," Would it not help us both if we could take advantage of a rare moment of privacy and talk as man and wife, rather than monarch and subject?
He is trying to forcibly drag her out of the throne and into the marriage.
This is where Delderfield inserts his core philosophy of what a marriage truly is.
Yes, because Albert diagnoses the disease killing their relationship. He outlines the structure of their lives for her. He says, first, there is their public duty maintaining the stoic dignity of the queen and consort in front of the world.
And second, there is their private romantic affection, the physical love they share behind the closed doors of the bedchamber.
Victoria thinks those two things are sufficient. But Albert introduces a new concept. He calls it the third estate of marriage.
The third estate is such a powerful phrase.
It really is. Victoria treats him like a very handsome, very beloved pet. She wants him to look spectacular standing next to the throne, and she wants him to love her in the bedroom.
But she completely shuts him out of her intellectual and political life. She treats his mind as irrelevant to their love.
And Albert defines this third estate as intellectual companionship and shared purpose.
He warns her that their marriage cannot survive if they spend their private hours outside the bedroom playing infantile guessing games about piles of ruins.
He points out that they have the ultimate privilege. They hold the key to a world of intellect. They could be engaging with writers, reformers, scientists, inventors.
Instead, she is forcing him to play trivia with ladies-in-waiting.
Right. He is demanding to be a full partner in her life, a partner of the mind, not just an ornament of state.
You know, listening to Albert describe the third estate, it strikes me that Delderfield is totally rejecting the modern fairy tale romance.
Oh, completely. Think about how modern dramatists tackle love today. If you watch a movie or read a book about romance, it is almost exclusively portrayed as finding your soulmate, experiencing pure passion, and living off the emotional thrill of connection.
Delderfield is arguing that passion has a strict shelf life.
Exactly. If you don't replace that initial infatuation with intellectual partnership and a shared burden of purpose, the marriage will eventually hollow out into mere etiquette and resentment. Is that what he's getting at?
That is precisely his argument. Delderfield portrays love as something that is hammered out on an anvil. It is forged through years of shared responsibility, deep frustration, and highly uncomfortable confrontations.
Albert is fighting for the survival of the marriage by fighting with Victoria.
Right. He recognizes that without mutual intellectual respect, he will become nothing more than a prisoner in a gilded cage, and their love will rot from the inside out.
It is a riveting interpretation of their relationship. But you know, whenever you listen to a historical drama, there is always that nagging voice in the back of your head.
Asking how much of this actually happened.
Yes. Are we just projecting 20th century marital psychology onto 19th century monarchs?
Well, to answer that, we have to dig into the actual historical sources.
And we are incredibly lucky because we have the Letters of Queen Victoria, Volume 1, alongside some incredible archival material from the Goethe Institute,
which holds extensive records of Albert's correspondence and diaries from his time in Germany and England.
So when you cross-reference Delderfield's script with those primary sources, what do we find?
You find that his dramatic imagination is fiercely grounded in historical reality. Let's look at the baseline of their affection first.
Okay.
Victoria's actual letters from this early period of their marriage reveal a love that is almost desperate in its intensity. She writes to her uncle, King Leopold of the Belgians, calling Albert an angel sent from heaven.
Which is, of course, where the title of the play, My Dearest Angel, comes from.
Exactly. She literally writes to Leopold, "I do not think it possible for anyone in the world to be happier or as happy as I am."
But that intense, almost blinding infatuation created the exact blind spots Delderfield highlights in the chess game.
She loved him so intensely as an idol that she couldn't see his desperate need for a functional purpose.
And the historical tensions regarding Albert's lack of power were incredibly acute, perhaps even more severe than the play suggests.
Oh, definitely. The play shows Albert chafing under the fact that his private secretary, Mr. Anson, was chosen for him by the Prime Minister, Lord Melbourne.
Rather than Albert choosing his own staff.
Right. And to understand why this hurt Albert so deeply, you have to understand the political context of the 1840s.
Because of the bedchamber crisis?
Yes, Victoria was fiercely protective of her independence because of that crisis, where she had successfully fought off attempts by politicians to change her personal staff.
So she viewed any attempt by Albert to reorganize the household as an encroachment on her hard-won autonomy.
Meanwhile, Albert complained bitterly in his letters to his friends in Germany about being a master in his own house in name only. He famously wrote that he was only the husband and not the master in the house.
He was legally the man of the house, but constitutionally he was a nobody.
And the letters from King Leopold are absolutely fascinating in this context.
Leopold was basically the puppet master, wasn't he?
He orchestrated this whole marriage to secure political alliances for Belgium. So he writes to Albert with this incredibly pragmatic, almost managerial advice.
Like a boss coaching an employee.
Exactly. He praises Albert for being gentle and open to reason, but then he delivers this incredibly strict warning. He tells Albert never to let a single day pass with a misverstandness, a misunderstanding.
Wow.
He commands him to hash out every single disagreement with Victoria before the day ends, because letting resentment fester with a monarch is politically and personally fatal.
That concept of I misverstandness is exactly the dynamic we see playing out in the chess game scene.
Albert refuses to let the day end on a misunderstanding. He forces the confrontation, dropping the fire irons to ensure the issue is addressed immediately.
Now, where Delderfield obviously takes necessary historical license is in the compression of time.
Right. History is messy. It took Albert years of slow, careful political maneuvering, heavily guided by his advisor, Baron Stockmar, to gradually take over the Queen's dispatch boxes.
He slowly modernized the royal household by proving his administrative competence over a decade. But you can't put years of slow bureaucratic maneuvering into an 81-minute radio play without putting the audience to sleep.
Delderfield forces Victoria and Albert to hash out their political and domestic boundaries in rapid, explosive, closed-door arguments to illuminate the drama.
He takes a decade of political shifting and compresses it into a marital crucible.
There is also a crucial piece of historical context from the letters that we found in our research. It isn't explicitly spoken aloud in the play, but it completely underscores the psychological themes Delderfield is playing with regarding Victoria's vulnerability.
Yes. I was absolutely blown away by this when I read it in her letters. In her correspondence with King Leopold, Victoria frankly admits that she is terrified of having children.
She really was.
She writes that she does not want a large family. She says, and this is a direct quote from the most powerful woman on earth, "Men never think, at least seldom think, what a hard task it is for us women to go through this very often."
It is a breathtakingly humanizing admission. You have to remember the physical reality of the 19th century. Childbirth was incredibly dangerous, even for a queen.
And she would go on to have 9 children, spending a massive portion of her early reign pregnant, which physically incapacitated her and forced her to rely more heavily on Albert.
Here is the sovereign of a global empire,
Yeah.
and she is expressing a profound, universal dread about the biological realities of being a wife.
She is a monarch, yes, but she is also a young, frightened woman whose body is demanded by the state to produce heirs.
That dual identity, the supreme sovereign and the biologically vulnerable wife, is the exact tightrope Delderfield is walking in this play.
Which makes me think it takes a very specific kind of writer to look at the global epicenter of 19th century imperialism, to look at the Queen of the British Empire, and decide to write a play focusing on a husband who feels intellectually ignored and a wife who is navigating domestic anxiety.
You do not get that kind of script from a standard royal biographer or a political historian.
No. You get that from a writer who spent his formative years observing the minutiae of everyday human behavior. We really need to talk about R.F. Delderfield himself.
Delderfield's background completely explains why he approached this royal story the way he did. Ronald Frederick Delderfield was born in London in 1912 and died in 1972.
Today, if people recognize his name, it is mostly as a novelist.
He wrote these massive, sprawling sagas of English life. A Horseman Riding By, the Avenue series, the Swan Saga.
But he actually started his career as a playwright, finding huge success with a play called Worm's Eye View.
His roots were deeply provincial and journalistic, which formed his entire worldview. He grew up in London and Surrey, but eventually moved to Devon. His father was a liberal politician who bought a local newspaper, the Exmouth Chronicle.
And Delderfield ended up taking over as the editor of that paper.
Right. Think about what the editor of a small-town newspaper in Devon actually does on a day-to-day basis. He covered magistrates' courts, local council meetings, amateur dramatics, agricultural shows.
He wrote obituaries for everyday people in the town. He famously called these experiences his character farms.
I love that phrase, character farms.
He was literally harvesting the everyday behavior, the petty squabbles, the quiet dignities, and the tragedies of ordinary people.
The scholar Victor J. Lambs wrote a fascinating book about Delderfield, and he described him as a cultural historian who presented realities as stories.
His absolute signature as a writer was this deep, abiding sympathy for ordinary human beings. He cared about family life, local institutions, the quiet obligations of duty, and the slow passage of time across generations.
But this is where there's a massive paradox, right?
Exactly what I was thinking. If Delderfield's absolute superpower as a writer was observing 20th century suburbanites, local farmers, and small-town councilmen, why on earth did he write a play about Queen Victoria and Prince Albert?
They are the ultimate untouchable British elites. They sit at the very apex of the global hierarchy.
They're the furthest thing imaginable from his character farms in Devon.
It seems contradictory at first, but it's actually the core genius of the play. Delderfield possessed a unique, almost radical form of democratic empathy.
When he looked at Victoria and Albert, he simply refused to see the crowns, the scepters, the velvet, and the empire.
He stripped all of the historical mythology away to find the ordinary humans beneath the titles. He treated them with the exact same psychological curiosity and unsentimental observation that he treated a local Devonshire farmer arguing over property lines in a magistrate's court.
He essentially dragged them down from the palace balcony, locked the doors, and put them in a regular living room.
Precisely. And in many ways, My Dearest Angel contains the seeds of all his later famous novels.
His grand overarching theme was always about ordinary people trying to live decent, meaningful lives against the massive, sweeping, often uncaring movement of history.
Victoria and Albert, in Delderfield's hands, are just the ultimate example of that theme. They are two people desperately trying to forge a decent, functional marriage while the immense, grinding machinery of the British Empire operates around them.
But attempting to live a decent life while the machinery of history grinds on sometimes requires you to turn around and face the ugly realities of that machinery.
You can't just hide in the domestic sphere forever.
No, and that brings us to the absolute climax of the play, the most explosive, devastating moment between the two of them.
The dirty smoke, grime giant scene.
The tension between them has finally reached an absolute breaking point. Albert has been shut out of power for too long.
And Victoria is stubbornly clinging to her absolute authority, terrified of yielding an inch.
So Albert basically drops a nuclear bomb on the marriage. He threatens to leave her.
He tells her he is going to pack his bags and return to his homeland of Rosenau in Germany.
He outright refuses to stay in England and merely serve as a breeding stallion, fathering princes for what he bitterly calls her sham paradise.
It is at this moment that Albert launches into a blistering, unforgiving attack on Victoria's entire worldview.
Now, before we analyze the text of this speech, we need to pause and issue a clear note of neutrality.
Right, because the sources we are drawing from, and the play itself, touch on highly charged political concepts.
In this scene, Albert expresses deeply progressive critiques of 19th century capitalism, industrialization, and imperialism. Victoria, conversely, holds to a very traditionalist, romanticized view of her country.
Furthermore, Delderfield's own politics were famously a complex blend of progressive empathy for the working class and a free market traditionalism.
So we want to be absolutely clear to you, the listener, that we are not taking sides on Albert's progressivism, Victoria's traditionalism, or Delderfield's personal politics. Our goal here is strictly to impartially report on the content provided.
We are just conveying the ideas contained in the original source material, marveling at how Delderfield uses this intense, high-stakes political debate as the ultimate crucible for their marriage.
We are dissecting the mechanics of the drama, not endorsing the politics of the 1840s.
So Albert attacks Victoria's vision of England. Victoria sees merry England.
She has this picturesque, romanticized fantasy of her nation. She sees strong Shire horses, women weaving laurel wreaths, peasants happily playing cricket on the village green.
It's an image straight out of a storybook.
And Albert utterly shatters that fantasy. He tells her that underneath her feet there is a different England entirely. He describes the true state of the nation as a dirty, smoke-grime giant groaning in its sleep.
It is a stunning piece of dialogue, heavily rooted in the historical reality of the 1840s, a period often referred to as the Hungry 40s.
He talks about how this giant is plagued by unjust, aggressive wars, specifically mentioning the conflicts in China, referencing the Opium Wars, and the disaster in Afghanistan.
He forces her to look at domestic suffering, talking about the exorbitant price of wheat keeping people starving, about children working naked in the coal mines, about exhausted workers falling asleep into the machines in her manufacturing towns, and millions of her subjects surviving purely on poor relief.
He confronts her with the brutal reality of the Chartist movement and the Industrial Revolution. He tells her that her nation is teetering on the edge of bankruptcy and social collapse because it refuses to look at the reality of its own suffering.
He tells her that if she is satisfied with ruling over this sham paradise without trying to fix it, then she should let him go back to Germany.
It is a devastating, almost cruel critique of her reign. He is attacking her competence as a monarch to save his soul as a man.
But what makes this scene so brilliant dramaturgically is how Victoria reacts to this onslaught.
Initially, she retreats into her role as queen. She is furious. She tries to summon her old governess, Baroness Lehzen, trying to hide behind the authority figures of her childhood.
She coldly tells Albert he has 5 minutes to pack his bags and leave the country.
But then she stops.
The silence in the audio here is profound.
And the resolution of this fight is the core message of the entire play. Victoria realizes in a moment of terrifying clarity that Albert's harsh, brutal words aren't coming from a place of spite.
They aren't a political power grab or a desire to usurp her throne for his own glory.
No, they are coming from a place of deep, agonizing conscience. He is looking at the immense suffering of her people, and it is tearing him apart that they have the immense power to fix it, but she is refusing to let him help.
In that moment of silence, Victoria finally drops her defensiveness.
She realizes that the man standing in front of her is the exact partner she needs, the partner she has been avoiding because she was afraid of sharing power.
She dismisses her overbearing governess, Lehzen, symbolizing a break from her childhood dependencies. She officially makes Albert her confidential secretary.
Most importantly, she yields the dispatch boxes to him.
We have to explain the dispatch boxes, because yielding them wasn't just a domestic compromise about who pays the bills.
Right. The red dispatch boxes contained the literal operational secrets, the daily running, and the intelligence reports of the entire British Empire.
Giving him the key to those boxes was a massive transfer of global geopolitical power.
She yields the empire to save the marriage. If we synthesize what Delderfield is arguing here, it is profound.
He is stating that a successful marriage isn't the absence of conflict. It isn't just smiling at each other over the breakfast table or avoiding difficult topics.
The successful marriage is the willingness to share power, to be brutally honest with each other even when it hurts, and to turn outward together, shoulder to shoulder, to face the smoke, grime giant of life.
The realization that grand political scenery, the wars, the poverty, the empire, the dispatch boxes ultimately become secondary to the profound reality of two people committing to face that machinery together brings a certain beloved literary giant into the room.
A giant whose name is actually on the door of this very radio station.
G.K. Chesterton.
Exactly, because we have to look closely at the date this play was broadcast to the British public, December 21st, 1963.
Just 4 days before Christmas.
Now, I don't want to force a cheesy Hallmark holiday interpretation onto a play that is this deeply political and psychologically complex, but you cannot ignore the resonance of broadcasting this specific story at that specific time of year.
Delivering a narrative that is ultimately centered on home, loyalty, family, and deep affection beneath public grandeur right before Christmas adds an immense layer of warmth to the broadcast.
Bringing Chesterton into the conversation feels entirely natural when you look at Delderfield's themes.
Chesterton's philosophy was famously aggressively dedicated to awakening people from what he called the nightmare of nihilism.
He fought relentlessly against the modern idea that life was meaningless, purely material, or defined entirely by massive political forces.
His method for combating that nihilism was to find the most enormous cosmic significance in apparently ordinary everyday things.
Chesterton could look at a modest home, a simple marriage vow, or an act of everyday human loyalty, and he would see the entire universe contained within them.
To him, the domestic sphere wasn't a retreat from the real world. The domestic was the cosmic.
The promises we make to each other in private are the foundation of reality.
That is exactly what Delderfield is executing in this play. If you look at the structure of My Dearest Angel through a Chestertonian lens, you realize that the British Empire, the palaces, the geopolitical maneuvering, the prime ministers, all of it is just stage scenery.
It is a massive, elaborate backdrop.
The genuinely important, earth-shattering event in this narrative isn't who controls the dispatch boxes or what happens to the Corn Laws.
The most important event in the universe of this play is simply that two people have decided, against all odds, to truly belong to one another.
Take this man and use him. His loyalty, his service, his love. That is the final profound line of her great realization.
Which brings us back here to the common room. Our coffee cups are empty. The vacuum tubes in our imaginary 1960s valve radio are cooling down, and this deep dive is winding to a close.
We've journeyed from the quiet, uncausable intimacy of a 1963 BBC Sunday play broadcast through the intense, historically documented reality of Victoria and Albert's letters.
All viewed through the wonderfully humane Chestertonian lens of R.F. Delderfield, a man who cared more about the human heart than the royal crown.
It is a remarkable journey through audio and history, and I think it leaves us with one final provocative thought to consider before we go.
It brings us right back to the title of the play itself, My Dearest Angel.
As we discussed, that is a direct quote from Victoria's early, wildly infatuated letters to King Leopold. In the beginning of their relationship, to her, Albert was literally an angel.
He was flawless, beautiful, ethereal, sent from heaven merely to be admired and to provide a romantic escape from her duties.
He was a porcelain shepherdess, kept safely on a shelf to be looked at, but never used for anything practical.
But by the end of Delderfield's play, the listener realizes a profound tectonic shift has occurred in her understanding of love.
Albert is no longer an angel. He is a grounded, frustrated, brilliant, sometimes angry, and deeply flawed man on earth.
He snores in front of the court. He yells at her. He threatens to pack his bags and leave. He is real.
And what Delderfield leaves us with is the beautiful realization that loving a real, complex person on earth with all their demands and frustrations is vastly more difficult and infinitely more beautiful than loving a flawless imaginary angel.
It's like looking at that massive, ornate painting of the palace we talked about at the very beginning of the show. You can stand there and stare at the gleaming crown all day long, but the real masterpiece, the true art, is the quiet, difficult, intensely human negotiation happening in the shadows.
So true.
So as we sign off from the Common Room at Chesterton Radio, we want to leave you with this question to explore on your own. Given how Victoria and Albert's private devotion had to weather the intense scrutiny of an empire, ask yourself how the pressures of the modern world, the constant connectivity, the public performance of our lives on social media acts as our own modern empire, threatening the quiet sanctuary of our relationships. What grand scenery surrounds your own everyday life, and are you willing to look past that spectacle to face the gritty, beautiful reality of the people sitting right in front of you?
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
Take care of each other.